Hi there, thanks for joining me today. I hope you're hyped up and ready to go because we're going to be talking about something that may not be so glamorous or sexy, but that can have a surprisingly big impact on your day-to-day business. Organizing your Google Drive for clarity, speed, and error-free use. Now, if you've ever spent 5 minutes hunting for a file, this presentation is for you. If you've ever accidentally edited the wrong version of a file, this presentation is for you. Or if you've ever wondered, didn't I already create something like this? Well, you guessed it, this presentation is also for you. My goal is to help you build the world's most beautiful Google Drive, if that even is such a thing. It's to help you build one that works for you instead of against you. All right, let's dive into the drive. First, a little about me in case we haven't yet met. I am Suze, the Chief Everything Officer over here at SP Success Factor. I'm a content strategist and systems enthusiast who loves finding practical, low-lift ways to make running business easier. Over the years, I've created thousands of documents, spreadsheets, presentations, templates, digital resources, and so on. And along the way, I've learned, sometimes the hard way, that a little organization up front can save an incredible amount of time and frustration and energy later on. These ideas I'll share today aren't the only right way to organize a Google Drive, but they are approaches that have worked well for me and can be adapted to fit your own business and working style. They can also be flexed to work with other file storage platforms. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to cover why organization matters, a simple framework for thinking about your Google Drive, and several practical ideas you can start using right away. My hope is that by the end of the session, you'll be inspired to block out just 1 hour this week, maybe, to begin auditing and improving your drive. You don't have to finish everything in one setting. You just have to get started and move forward with attention and intention. Let's start with the obvious question. How can getting your Google Drive in order help you? What are the bennies that are so worth the effort here? Well, let me put it this way. A disorganized Google Drive costs more than most people realize. It wastes time searching up files, it leads to duplicate work because you can't find something you've already created, it increases the chances of making mistakes or editing the wrong version or sharing the wrong version of a file, and it adds unnecessary clutter to your drive and mental clutter to your day. Your Google Drive should support your business, not slow it down. And every minute you spend organizing it can save you many more minutes and plenty of headaches down the road. It's that iceberg scenario. You can kind of create a mental image of that. The tiny top part is the proactive, preventative, organizational effort versus that big hidden bottom part. That's the time and energy suck wasted on inefficiencies like looking for something you can't find or fixing errors. If you know, you know. You know? Here's the idea I'd love for you to keep in mind throughout this presentation. Your Google Drive should function like a well-organized library, not a junk drawer. Get that? Library, not junk drawer. When everything has a logical home, you spend less time searching, less time second-guessing yourself, and more time actually getting work done. The ideas we'll cover here today are simply different ways to build that library. We'll cover 12 tactics in total, and tactic number 1, declutter first, sets the foundation for the rest. Before you create new folders, rename files, or build better systems, start by clearing out the clutter you already got. Delete files you no longer need, archive completed projects, merge duplicates, identify folders that have become dumping grounds. And, think of this like cleaning out a closet before buying new clothes or new storage bins. My challenge for you is simple. Schedule 1 hour this week to audit your Google Drive. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just make it better than it is today. Okay, with the cleanup behind us, let's shift to more forward-looking tactics, starting with which account to use. If you have multiple Google accounts, meaning you have multiple Google Drives, make sure you're using the right one. Many small business owners have, personal account, a business account, or like 5, like me, etc. And that can lead to confusion, misplaced files, and unnecessary searching. Take a few minutes to decide where different types of files belong and, when appropriate, consolidate or migrate them. A little clarity here can prevent a lot of frustration later, and putting your files and folders in the right place from the get-go is definitely a winner. Our next tactic, pick an organizational structure for your folders that makes sense. Think about your top-level folders first. Ask yourself, if someone else, or maybe future you, needed to find something 6 months or a year from now, where would they or you expect it to live? Keep your structure simple, logical, and intuitive. Not too deep and not too broad. Avoid creating folder rabbit holes where your files disappear several levels down, but you also don't want a bazillion dissimilar or disconnected files lounging around unorganized. You may want to create a hierarchy based on projects, clients, products, campaigns, asset type, etc., and you'll probably end up with a mix. For example, you might create a folder called client work, and inside that folder, you have a folder for each client. And within each client's folder, you have a folder for each project, campaign, or deliverable, as well as maybe a client admin folder for keeping everything related to that particular client. The goal isn't to create the most folders possible, it's to make navigation feel natural. A place for everything and everything in its place, as they say. Now, one approach I personally haven't yet tried is organizing using projects. I just recently discovered this feature, so maybe it's new, I don't know. But it's a feature in Google Drive that lets you group files and folders together as projects, and when everything related to a project lives together, your documents, spreadsheets, images, meeting notes, drafts, etc., you spend less time jumping around between folders and wondering where something belongs. Projects naturally become containers for the work you're doing, making it easier to stay focused and find what you need. Now, if you give these a go, let me know what you think. I want to know if they're worth it. Our fifth tactic is use smart naming conventions. Now, this one hails from my days of designing and managing a document control system for a medical device company. And aside from the regulatory requirements I was operating under back then, good folder and file naming is just good common sense. Folder and file names are one of the simplest ways to make your drive easier to use. Be consistent, use descriptive names, include dates, versions, or prefixes when they add clarity. Because we've all seen and are probably really guilty of names like final _ presentation _ final -- final v4 pptx. And we all know how unhelpful that is and are probably like, what the heck does that even mean, right? No idea. A better approach would be a convention like this. For a folder, maybe use the client, project, or product name as the folder name. I know it's a really radical idea, but trust me, it's not a bad one. And for a file, maybe something like I've put on this slide for you. And if previous versions are in the folder with it, or you have a policy of only retaining the latest version, well, you'll know this is the golden copy. Sometimes I also tack on the word draft or final to the file name, like if I'm handing it off to a client, and that just adds an extra layer of clarity for them. When creating a file naming convention, try to think about how you'll search for that file or folder later, not just how you're thinking about it today. Your future self will definitely thank you, and if you're collaborating with others, they'll thank you too, because smart file and folder naming increases transparency and reduces confusion all across the board. Here's some tricks I use all the time that make a surprisingly big difference. They aren't hard and fast rules. As with everything else, you can flex and finesse them as makes sense for you. Capitalize the first letter of each word. When you need a longer file or folder name, this will help your eye quickly catch and understand what you're looking at. Use hyphens instead of underscores for 2 reasons. 1, underscores are very hard to see when the file name is part of a clickable URL link, which is usually underlined. And 2, for SEO purposes. Underscores join words so that search engines treat them as one search term rather than each word as its own term, meaning that it might make it harder to find the file via search. Conversely, hyphens separate words, which could make finding your folders or files via search easier. Avoid special characters. These sometimes get messed up or converted to ASCII code and could just look kind of weird. And not all systems accept special characters, so there's that. Now, I still use special characters sometimes, like I'll use the ampersand in a folder name, which is a place I know it will work. Put a period or a Z in front of your file name. I put a period in front if I want the file or folder to appear at the top of my list, regardless of what its name is when I sort alphabetically. This is really helpful for corralling together the folders and files I'm actively using. I put a Z or sometimes an X in front of the name if I want it to appear at the bottom of the list of files and folders. And this is really helpful for sequestering folders and files I'm not actively using or that are obsolete or archived or just, I don't want to be touching them too much. Next, omit little words. These just add length to names and leaving them out doesn't usually reduce comprehension. Next, use truncations and abbreviations. This helps reduce file and folder name length as well, So instead of writing out like my full business name, I would use SBSF. And instead of using the full word favorite, I'd use fave, F-A-V. Next, no spaces, sometimes. Spaces can get stripped out of names or converted to ASCII code as well and just look weird. And this happens a lot with file names that are used in URLs. Typically, I like to replace spaces with hyphens, and doing so preserves the separation of words and phrases. Next, double check your spelling. Errors can make a file or folder show up in a different place than expected and throw off search results. Errors can mess up automations and permissioning. Errors can look unprofessional and careless. Now, again, these aren't rules, these are ideas. The goal is to create a naming convention that is easy to understand, easy to maintain, and easy to search. If you work with a team, consistency becomes even more valuable because everyone will then know what to expect and be able to work with your content much more easily. Google Drive gives us a few simple visual tools that are really easy to overlook. Here are some examples from my Google Drive. And you can also see some of those file structure practices and naming hacks in use too. Folder colors are great because they can help highlight key items or group similar items. Like all my inactive or old stuff, like stuff I don't really want to touch, goes in black folders. And Google also allows you to mark items as favorites, which are denoted by the little star. Favoriting files and folders can help keep those priority items close at hand because Google lets you view starred items together via an option in the nav bar. And both folder color and favoriting are available in Google Drive via the organization area on the shortcut menu. Emojis are another great way to make folders and files easier to scan, to stand out, and to understand at a glance. Just be intentional and sort of systematic about it so your drive doesn't start looking like, Joseph's Technicolor raincoat or kaleidoscope or something. A little visual organization can improve usability, but too much can be too much and just become visual clutter. On to tactic number 7. One of my favorite Google Drive features is shortcuts, which you can see in this set of screenshots. Instead of creating multiple copies of the same file or folder, you can create shortcuts. This helps maintain a single source of truth. It reduces confusion, saves storage space, and lowers the risk of accidentally updating one version while forgetting to update another. It's also a lot easier to manage access to the files and folders this way. Whenever possible, avoid duplication. Let one file be the file. Another feature that most people, myself included, barely use is the folder and file details area. You can access this via the folder or file information section on the shortcut menu. You click it, a sidebar opens, and at the bottom is a description field into which you can pop anything you'd like. And this can be a good place to put helpful tidbits like the file status or when it was last reviewed or the goal or purpose of the item and so on. What you put in there is searchable, which is good to know. And that brings us to Search Smarter. Google Drive has really powerful search, filtering, and sorting capabilities. So before you spend time clicking through folders, try searching intentionally. Use keywords, sort by file type or owner, look at recent, so on. There's lots of options. Google Drive's search engine looks at a variety of elements when searching, and this can include file or folder name, metadata, the description that we just talked about, or the full text of all the files you have access to, and visual content like images. Sometimes, or maybe often or all the time, the fastest way to find something isn't browsing, it's actually searching. Keep it in mind. Tactic number 10 might seem like it doesn't belong on our list, but I truly think it does. Because what better way to reduce clutter than to not have files in your drive that you don't need? And what better way to reduce making mistakes in files than by not handing over the keys to the kingdom? So if you share files with clients, contractors, or teammates, take a moment to review who has access to what. Not everyone needs editing permissions, and some files are better shared as view only or comment only, or maybe even not at all. A quick permissions check can prevent accidental edits and keep sensitive information protected and, minimize the amount of stuff you have in your drive. This tactic harkens back to tactic number 5, the use good naming conventions one a bit, but then goes beyond that. Yes, we've established that we've all seen file names like proposal, final, version 7, final 2, really final, 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 final. It happens. And I personally think that keeping track of versions, especially across a team, is one of the messiest and most impactful things ever. And we know it's better to use a file or folder name that has teeth, one that's descriptive and accurate, but you can't stop there. It's also important to consider versioning a little more holistically and come up with and follow practices that make it easy to know which version of a file you're looking at or working on or sharing. A simple versioning system can eliminate that confusion, mistakes, waste of time, the whole shebang. You just need to decide how many versions of a file you'll keep, where, and for how long, and decide how you'll label drafts, revisions, and final versions. Then use that system consistently. And Google Drive has settings you can configure to help you with this. For example, when I upload a file with the same name as one that's already in my drive, a pop-up appears asking how to handle the documents. Should it replace the old one with a new one, or save the new one as a separate version while also preserving the old version too? So a little structure and some helpful tools go a long way here. Lean into it. Organization isn't a rotisserie chicken you put in your Ronco oven. You can't just set it and forget it. It's not something you do once or done and never look back at. It's something you maintain because you, your business, and your content are living, evolving entities. Which brings us to our last tactic of the day. Audit regularly. Every few months, spend a little time cleaning up your drive. Delete what you no longer need, archive completed work, look for duplicate folders, update naming conventions if necessary, and so on. Small regular maintenance is almost always easier than a massive cleanup years later. We've covered a lot today, so let's pull it all together. First, notice that none of these ideas are particularly revolutionary or complicated. The magic isn't in any one tip or tactic, or in all of them. It's in combining them, the ones that make sense, into a system that works for you right now, but also with a little bit of an eye on tomorrow. And no, it's not necessary to implement every single tactic to reap benefits, but your efforts are additive if you're incorporating the tactics that are relevant and timely for your particular situation. Now, I get it. Change is hard. New things are tricky, yada, yada. So you may be struggling with where or how to begin. Just start with 1 hour. Choose 1 or 2 ideas from today's presentation, implement them, see how you're doing, see how it feels, and then build from there. Baby steps are progress, and they add up to meaningful strides in the right direction. And in the end, it all boils down to this. Your Google Drive should make it easier to confidently find and use your files, folders, and the content in them. I hope today's presentation gave you some practical ideas and maybe, hopefully, a little motivation to go tackle your Google Drive. Remember, organization doesn't have to happen all at once. Small improvements made consistently can create a smoother, faster, less stressful way of working. And to help you streamline the behind-the-scenes side of your business even further, I have a little parting gift for you. You are invited to grab this collection of business admin templates. They are designed to help you save time, stay organized, and create more consistency in your day-to-day operations. Again, they're free, so go grab them. I appreciate you being here and would love to stay connected. The best way to do that is to join my email list. Every week I share informational and educational content, commentary, which sometimes leans into being more of a pure rant, but whatever, and loads of other resources, all designed for small businesses like ours. If you claim the business admin templates, you'll be added to my email list automatically, but otherwise you can find me via my website. The URL is right here on the screen for you, and you can subscribe there too. Holler if you have any questions or more organizational ideas to use with Google Drive. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day. Bye.